The Seattle Seahawks have signed Benson Mayowa to a one-year contract, another edge rusher, pass rusher that you may have heard of before if you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, if you've been really in the weeds over the years. Benson Mayowa did actually play for the Seahawks his first year of his career, that season that the Seahawks won the Super Bowl in 2013. He was around. He's 6'3", 265. Mayowa has had kind of like a suitcase career. He's kind of been everywhere throughout his NFL journey so far. He's been with the Raiders in Oakland. He's been with the Cowboys. He's been with Seattle. And now he finds a home once again in Seattle. And he's still a young player. I believe he's only 27, 28 years old. He actually had his most productive NFL career last season, putting up around 6.5 sacks with the Raiders and being one of their more productive in terms of sack number pass rushers last season. And I really look at this move and it says a couple of things. First, obviously he's a scheme fit, being that he was there his first year. He probably just couldn't make the team because that defensive line was absolutely loaded and he was a young player that was relatively inexperienced, not a high draft pick, so it didn't really make sense to keep him around. But now that he's been around and he's had some success elsewhere, and now that Seattle doesn't necessarily have that 2013 defensive line with Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill and the list goes on, that they bring in Mayowa to help their pass rush out and give them some depth at this position, a position that they don't know the future of. Is Jadeveon Clowney going to be back? To me, that's the biggest. When I saw this signing, I was like, ooh, does that mean that the Seahawks are preparing for life without Jadeveon Clowney? I think that would be a major hit if they were not able to bring back Jadeveon Clowney, because I think he was their best defensive player last year when he played, and I think he was their most destructive, important player on their defense last year, and that's even putting him above Bobby Wagner. Now, I'm not saying he's a better player than Bobby Wagner, but I am saying that when you have that pass rusher and that guy that can control and take over a game at the edge position, it's something special for a defense, and that is what Clowney actually gave the Seahawks in few games that he was able to be 100%. And that's the thing with Clowney, just going on a tangent about him. Are they going to have him back? And if they do, are they going to be able to rely upon him, right? So even if Clowney is there, is Mayowa a guy that you sign anyways, because Clowney is not always on the field. So you need to have some backup type players that can play starting snaps. And Mayowa, he's definitely been capable of that. So last season, played 15 games, had 7 sacks. 4 sacks the year before that with the Cardinals, also missed that he played there as well. And in the Dallas Cowboys in 2016, he also had 6 sacks. So he's had productive sack seasons. He is kind of that traditional 4-3 defensive end. That's what he is, and he's more of a pass rusher than anything else. He's never really been a great run defender. He's a guy that you put on the field for third down or for pass rushing situations and third and longs, or when you know the team's going to pass and you just say, hey, buddy, go get the quarterback. That's what he's there for, and that's where he's been productive. And last 2 seasons, he's just been getting better and better. He had 11 quarterback hits in 2018, 10 in 2019, which were his 2 most productive seasons. And in terms of sacks, he's been more consistent, 4 sacks and then 7 sacks. So he's even a player that's continuing to reach the prime, even though he's now 29. I feel like he's just hitting his peak. So that's good for the Seahawks that they're getting this type of player. When looking at some of his advanced statistics, he had 16 pressures in 2018, 15 pressures in 2019. Not bad numbers for a player that isn't necessarily a starter, but more of a rotation guy. He played his most snaps ever with the Cardinals in 2018. They were the worst team in the league that year, so kind of makes sense. Played 49%. The rest of his career, he's played around 30% snaps. He played 29 last year with the Raiders, who had a lot of young players in the rotation, and Mayowa was one of the actual older players on that defensive line. When looking at Seattle's depth chart, he'll probably play a little bit. I don't expect him to play any sort of starting role, even if Clowney does not come back to the team. I think they're relying a lot on LJ Collier to be a starter this year. He was a first-round pick last year, and they have high hopes for him. At the very least, he could play a lot of snaps coming in certain situations. Bruce Irvin is probably certainly going to be a starter for their defense. They just signed him from the Panthers. They have Rasheem Green, who can play some snaps every once in a while. Isn't like a standout, but a solid player nonetheless. They did lose a little bit of their depth in the interior of their defensive line, losing Al Woods and Jefferson. So that's going to hurt them. They might get a player back or a player or two back in the draft. We'll have to see, or continue to sign some of these veterans that are still out there. But I think Mayowa will actually give them a little bit more speed, a little bit more edge, ability. And when you look at this team last year, I felt like they were missing that extra edge guy anyways. It was Clowney and kind of nobody else. They tried the Ezekiel Ansah kind of experiment. It didn't really work out, and nobody was really able to step up. Collier was hurt for a lot of the year, so now maybe this year, if they're able to bring back Clowney, or even if they're not, they're just looking for some extra players at that position that can get after the quarterback, and Benson Mayowa certainly fits the bill. He's not going to wow you, but he's certainly an NFL quality edge rusher who's had some production in his career, and those players are important for depth purposes, and especially on the defensive line where you need like 8 of these guys that can go on a regular basis. So Benson Mayowa signs a 1-year contract with the Seahawks, another solid move by the Seahawks to beef up their defense.